Hello there and welcome back to another video here on Wristwatch Revival. My name is Marshall. Thank you so much for coming along. This time on the bench, we have a vintage Vega watch here. It is a women's dress watch from probably the 70s, I would guess. And as you can see, it has this kind of Cartier tank shape to it, but it's got a textured case. It's a rectangular dial. You can see the texture on the case right there. It's gold. And then Roman numerals around the dial. Now, this watch actually belongs to my aunt, and she told me it stopped working. And I said, oh, well, what did you drop it? Did something happen? You can take a look here. This is an 18 karat gold case, by the way. Very nice. And she said, well, I don't know. I did the dishes a few times with it, and maybe it got a little fog in there, but that's about it. I said, okay, you better bring it over because that's really bad. That's the kind of thing that can absolutely ruin a watch. And I'm trying to turn the crown here. I can't even turn the crown, which is not a good start. It could be an indicator that there might be rust inside the watch. I'm going to use my strap removal tool here to take off the leather strap, and then we'll get into the movement itself, and we'll see what kind of movement. This isn't a brand that I've heard of before, but this was very typical. Swiss watchmaking, there would be all different types of brands. I'll use a case knife here to open up the back. And they would get movements from the movement manufacturers and have dials made and cases made and that type of thing. Ooh, I already see rust. Yeah, you see right there. Oh, no. Yeah, I'm not sure how much dishes washing were happening with this watch on, but this is definitely not the kind of watch that you can expose to water. This is very much a dress watch, not an everyday watch, like a watch that would have a waterproof rating. This one has none at all, like literally no waterproof rating at all. And I'm very concerned that water has gotten into the case and perhaps damaged the movement beyond just the keyless works. That's the part that makes it so I can't turn the crown. Let's take the movement and the dial out of this case. It actually just sits, it's not screwed into place or anything in this case back. So we'll take it out. Ooh, pretty. Nice job. So that's called perlage. That's done it's by hand using a machine. I don't know how to describe that, but yeah, really nice. Oh, and there we go. See, we can already see rust there on the crown wheel and around the keyless works. The question is, what sort of a disaster are we looking at here? Oh, this is bad. Yeah, so that's a screw that you undo to remove the dial, and it looks completely rusted over. Let's take a look at it on the microscope. Oh my God. Yeah, this is bad. Officially bad. That is the dial screw. And can I even reveal the slot of the screw? Not really. I mean, I guess you can kind of see where it was. So we're going to have to straight away start to bust out the tools that we have at our disposal. I'm going to start with some penetrating oil. This is an oil that is meant to get in between the crevices of like a rusted screw or a bolt or something like that. And I'm just going to apply it liberally to the dial screws here. There's actually two of them. But I mean, this is supposed to be the easy part. Like the dial screws are just supposed to come off and take off the dial, and then we can see what we're looking at as far as the rest of the movement. And I can't even get past that stage. I'm going to put some of this penetrating oil on the keyless works as well. And I may as well take off the balance while it's here. It doesn't look like it's been hit by any rust. And if I can safely remove it and kind of get it out of the way, that might help too. But we could have quite a disaster on our hands. The watch wasn't running, wasn't able to be set or wound. Yeah, the balance looks all right though. And as you can see, I'm just using my tweezers to kind of draw in some of the penetrating oil, and then I can deposit it exactly where I want on the movement. I'm trying not to go too crazy with it because the dial is still attached and I don't need this oil running all over and making its way to the front of the dial. Still, as it sits, I can do a little bit of, there we go. It looks like it finally broke free. A little bit of disassembly here just from the parts that I can see, even with the dial still on. And, yep, more rust. So, but this again, that is the place where water would get into the watch most likely. So the Keyless Works being rusted up, kind of assumed that when I couldn't turn the crown. The real question is, did it make it into the movement? So I'm going to turn the movement over and let that penetrating oil do its work. And we can continue with a little bit of disassembly here. I really hope I can save this thing. I mean, the case looked pretty good. Yeah, that's stuck in place as well. Probably rusted. Yep. Yep, there's rust on the bottom of that as well. So that means that some water got all the way over to the click and the click spring. This is the click here. And the rust can, look, there's a couple of issues that it causes. Some of them are more cosmetic, where the rust doesn't actually like eat away at the material. It just creates like a surface level discoloration. That's quite easily fixable. When it comes to actually eating away at the metal itself, you have to do an assessment, because it will take away some of the material, and sometimes that can ruin the part, and sometimes it can still be functional after that, and you have to kind of look at each part and figure it out from there. Small parts are very, very susceptible to this, yet there's more rust around the Keyless Works. And this is a particularly tough situation because this movement is very small. As you can see, it's a tiny movement that made it into this watch. And it looks like the mainspring barrel may be rusted in place. This should just slide out. Yeah, I can't get it out of there. I'm just going to leave it for now and continue disassembling now the train of wheels. For example, the train of wheels, this is the part that I'm really concerned about, because if the rust made it over to these, they're very thin. It's not a bunch of material there, and the rust can actually just eat them away entirely. This is true for very small springs, very small screws, and this movement has some of all of those. So let's see what we got. Yep, there's rust on the bottom of that. I can see it already. You see that? Yeah, it does look like it made it all the way into the movement. Shoot, I was really hoping we'd kind of dodge that bullet, but it doesn't look like we got away with it this time. It's not a complete disaster, but it's pretty close. Continuing the disassembly, I can take off the pallet fork bridge and the pallet fork which lies underneath it. It doesn't look like it's rusty. Yeah, no, it comes out okay. So it looks like it didn't quite get that far into the movement. I wonder if I can just pry up the barrel here. It feels like it's just rusted in a little bit. Yeah, there it goes. So I wouldn't be surprised if underneath there's some rust, and there it is. See that around the arbor in the middle? That's got some rust on it, so that was rusted into place. And this wheel, oh my God. Yeah, that's just a complete rust bucket. Well, we did not get lucky. Again, I was hoping that the rust would be contained to the Keyless Works, which is right next to the crown where it can come in, but it wasn't. You can see the rust made its way all the way over. And right here are the posts where the dial goes in, and then the dial screws on the outside push up against those posts. There's a dial screw on the bottom, and I can't get it to unscrew to free up the post. So I'm going to have to hope that that penetrating oil does its thing and, I don't know, figure something out to try to get, because if I have to be able to get the dial off, like no matter what we do with the movement, I have to be able to get that dial off. Okay, well, I can remove the barrel, though it just flew away. I'm going to have to find it. Again, this is tiny. You can see here how small even the mainspring barrel is on this watch, and that is going to make things more difficult with this rust situation. Okay, so I'm going to try something that I read online, which is I'm going to use a soldering iron to heat up one of the dial screws. The theory being that it'll expand a little bit and might be able to crack loose some of the rust and actually come out. Let's see if it works. I have to get very, very close and very specific with the screwdriver to see if I can undo it. And it looks like no. It just does not want to come out. And this is leaving us with precious few options. And I'm going to take a very extreme option. I'm going to go on my lathe, which I got not too long ago. And I'm actually going to try to just drill out this screw. So I've got a drill attachment on the lathe, and I'm just going to, by hand, try to use the drill to screw out the middle part of where that screw is. And then theoretically, I can either screw all the way down to where it touches the post, or I can screw a hole in it so that I can actually take it out. Let's see if I try to go all the way to the post. Let's see if it, oh, the dial is coming up a little bit. Hey, that might have actually worked. I would love it if I could get this dial off of here. Yeah, I think it's working. Yeah, it turns out just annihilating the entire screw is enough to get the job done. Let's see what it looks like under, oh my God. Okay. Well, that, oh my goodness sakes, that was a lot of work to find out the bad news. the rust is extensive, to say the least. You can see this side of the movement's just completely toasted. This is the dial side of the movement. I'm going to just put the dial away. We'll clean up the back of that later. I believe that that's mostly just staining on the back of the dial from the rust that came from the movement rather than the dial itself being rusted. But, man, trying to get this thing apart is going to be a real pain. Okay, the cannon pinion came off cleanly, so that's nice at least. That could have been rusted in place too. Let's see if I can take off this little cover plate. No. Nope, not even close. The problem is that the screws are very thin. So I'm going to have to, now that the dial's off, I can put the whole entire movement in a deruster. And I can put any of the parts that I found that had significant rust on them in it as well and let them sit overnight. And this is about the best that I'm going to be able to do to see if I can even get this movement fully disassembled. This is a disaster. I mean, this is about as bad as it gets. Hey, that looks actually quite a bit better already. It's been about a day. But you can see the movement doesn't have nearly as much just like sitting rust on it anymore. So I'm going to put it in some distilled water and then into some IPA, isopropyl alcohol. And that's just going to help me clean off any of the deruster that might still be on it. And just give it a little bath. And then the IPA will displace the water itself so that I don't introduce more rust to it. And then I'll also just dry it off with a blower. I got to say, that does look a heck of a lot better after sitting in that deruster for a day. The real question, though, is, this is a real question. The sensitive parts in the middle there, am I able to get those off? Because I still haven't even been able to take out the crown yet. And you can see that the sliding clutch is rusted on. You can see rust here in the blades. You can see what it's done to the top of this wheel here as well. And this actually cleaned up pretty good. So that part looks like I can keep it. See if I can get the freaking crown out. It is just rusted in place. Ugh. Nope, doesn't want to come out just yet. And as you can see, the keyless works are basically completely toasted. And this is the real issue. That screw on the top there, it's basically disintegrated. So I'm just going to try to pry off this plate around the screw and see if I can get it off, because that screw's a lost cause. Yeah, okay, it came off. But I mean, I'm trying to figure out how many of these parts I can actually salvage and how many are going to have to be replaced. Because I like to try to keep these watches as original as I can. The good news is that this one isn't like a family heirloom for my aunt. It's a watch that she bought and she really enjoys. So I mean, I want to get it back on her wrist and performing well and all that. But it doesn't, it doesn't have that thing where it was like, oh, this one belonged to great grandma, where I'd really be more sensitive to trying to keep it as original as possible. So we do have a little bit of wiggle room as far as that goes. But I mean, this wheel looks like it's toasted. These parts are just done. And again, the really hard part are the screws because they're so thin on the top that it just doesn't work. All right, so another bath in the de-ruster. I decided to give it another shot after having taken apart some more to see if I can get it maybe disassembled fully. Now parts are just falling off of it. And I can finally see if this crown will come out and stem. Oh, I have to pull really hard. It still doesn't. Oh, there it goes. Oh, finally. It only took 2 baths of de-ruster and multiple days, but finally the last major component comes out. Wow. Yeah, so that's a screw right there, by the way. Right there. That was once a screw holding down that plate. I mean, I can't even see a place where I could grip on with a screwdriver. Right? It's a complete lost cause. That's a screw right there as well, and it's completely seized on. Oh, man. And as you can see, the setting lever has been eaten away to the point that it's not going to be usable even if I could get it off of there. Oh, boy. Yeah, this is tough. You can see here I'm using pretty significant pressure to try to turn this screw, and it just doesn't. There's just nothing there to grab onto. The top of the screw head is very, very thin. And when it gets subjected to rust like this, it can basically disintegrate. So I'm just going to continue with trying to just pry these parts off just to see if I can salvage something out of it. But I mean, when you get to this stage, you're giving up on these parts at least. Yeah, and you can see it just completely broke that setting lever, but it was going to be unusable anyway. There's the yoke, and it looks pretty unusable as well. Funny enough, that yoke spring, it looks like it held up perfectly fine. I don't know how, but it did. All right, setting lever screw actually still looks like it's okay as well. Yeah, and the setting lever falls out, although it looks, well, at least badly discolored, though it may be structurally okay. And now I can remove this last thing. So, guess what this is? This, my friends, is what we call a donor movement. So I was able to look up what movement this is, and thankfully it was quite a commonly used movement for the era. This is a ETA movement. It's a 2412. And as you can see, it sort of looks like it might be running as well. It came just as a bare movement off of eBay. It said for parts, but it did say that the balance was okay. And just looking at the photos, it looks like everything's here. So what my plan is now is, well, I have to clean this movement as well because I'm going to be using parts from both. So first, I'm going to disassemble this one quickly and then get it into the watch cleaning machine along with the other movement. And then I'll kind of be able to do an assessment after I've got everything disassembled and cleaned about, all right, what's savable here? What can I use? And basically, when I do the reassembly, my plan is to just go through each part as I reassemble and say, okay, is this one usable from the old movement? If no, go over to the donor movement and grab that part and just continue with the build accordingly. And as you can see, this one comes apart much more easily than the one that was bathed in rust. So this is actually kind of a nice little movement to work on. Even though it is really small, it's well thought out and well designed. The funny part about how small the movement is as well is that I think I can put all of the parts from the whole movement into one of my little mesh baskets here. Normally, those are just for like certain categories of parts, but now I think I can just put the whole dang thing in there. And I do have 2 of these little baskets, so that would actually be quite handy because I could keep the rusted movement separate from the donor movement. So there's one. And now I can go for this one. And yeah, here's the rusted parts going in. Again, they've been mostly de-rusted, so it's not like total disaster, but they still need to go through the watch cleaning machine for the normal cleaning process as well, because the de-rusting does not replace that. All right, so now we've got both of the movements separate, and we can put them into this larger mesh basket. There's one of the main plates, and then there's the other one going in there. And then everything can go into, again, like I said, the watch cleaning machine, and that will set us up to be able to have between the pool of parts one functional movement, hopefully at least. Take a look at the case here too before we do start the machine cleaning. You can see the crystal is actually pretty banged up on this. I think I can improve that. So let's start by removing the crystal. It should just pop out. Yeah, some of these are glued in and some of these are friction fit, and this one was just friction fit. But, you know, on a nice dress watch, you don't want the crystal to be quite that damaged. Now, finding a new crystal, and by the way, doesn't this look like a little picture frame? It's kind of cool. For a watch like this would be quite difficult. So I'm going to be resurfacing, reconditioning this one. And I'm going to try to be gentle with it just because I can't really replace it easily. And I'm going to use some polishing compound, a liquid paste style compound. I could also use my polishing sticks to knock down the high points, but I want to see if a little gentler of an option with the polishing compound here might improve things greatly, and then make it so I don't need to use, actual sanding sticks on it. If I have to, I have to. It's okay. I've done that before, and I'm not worried about it. But if I can get away with just using this will be better. Oh yeah, look at that. That's a huge improvement already. Much, much, much better. So I'm actually quite happy with that. And now we can continue over to the watch cleaning machine. Now, the one on the left there is the actual watch cleaning machine. It goes through a 3-stage cleaning process. And this is the first one. This is actually the cleaning solution itself. And then the other two are rinses. There is a 4th stage. It's a drying cycle as well. There's a heated element on that left cylinder there, and it'll dry off the parts. So while the watch parts are being cleaned, I did want to mention I have a Patreon for this channel. If you like what I do here, and if you'd like to support me and support the channel, you can go to patreon.com/wristwatchrevival. Anybody who signs up gets a thank you card and a sticker in the mail as my way of saying thanks for supporting me. And you get access to the videos, like you get the rough cuts. So those are like the version of the video that's almost finished, usually a day or two before they go out. So you can kind of be ahead of the curve on that. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to each and every person who has chosen to support me over on Patreon. It does mean a lot, and it means that I get to keep making videos. So thank you very, very much. I usually leave the watch parts in the watch cleaning machine for about 8 minutes per section, and then about 4 minutes on the end. So it takes, a little over half an hour. This, however, is the ultrasonic cleaner, which I can use to clean watch cases and bigger parts. And then also it's a supplemental cleaner as well for the watch cleaning machine when necessary. So I'm going to start off, though, with just the watch case and the crystal going into here. And there's a special, cleaning fluid that goes in. You can also just use like detergents and things like that. And yeah, and then we'll let that do its thing. And now we can take it out. It is a little loud, the machine, but it does work extremely well. And you can see things looking nice and clean. I think this watch actually really just needed a good cleaning as well. These gold cases, they can pick up, especially with the pattern that this one had, that kind of bark pattern, it can pick up a bunch of little dirt and stuff. And this is what things look like when they are both movements, by the way, completely out of the watch cleaning machine and the ultrasonic cleaner. You can see that we've got one movement on the left with a bunch of rust damage, and then the other one on the right is going to be our donor movement. So that means we can start with our reassembly, and this starts, of course, with the mainspring, and I get to use probably my favorite tool of all of them, which is like saying a lot because there's a lot of tools in this hobby. These are mainspring winders. And these allow you to safely put the mainspring, wind it up, and put it back into the mainspring barrel. And you can see I can put the mainspring onto this winder handle, And then that'll allow me to wind it back into like kind of a makeshift mainspring barrel. And then I'll use that to transfer it to the real mainspring barrel. This is actually the smallest of these that I've ever used. I bought the little kit that has, kind of all the sizes, from pocket watches down to little tiny watches. But I have to say, this is the first time that I've used such a small setting. And done. Isn't that beautiful? Sitting snugly at home. And now I can put on the barrel arbor as well. And then we can secure the lid back on. And I have a little tool that I like to use for this. This is just a little tool that I got off of eBay. The big brands sell a version of this that's kind of unnecessarily expensive for just a plastic part. And so I just got the cheap one and it works great. Whenever you're dealing with watch tools for watchmaking, etc., you're often confronted with a choice between the expensive, really good version and the very, very, very cheap version. Often it's, of course, correct to buy the expensive one because you want tools that last and won't break and give you reliability and function well. But they can get quite pricey. And so there are times when it's okay to divert to the cheaper option. Okay, so we'll start off by putting in the mainspring barrel as well as a little bit of the train of wheels. And we'll get this secure and then we'll go for the actual train wheels themselves. And again, I have all the parts laid out in my parts tray. And so as each part comes up, I can choose which one I can get away with using. When possible, I'm going to use the original part. But as you saw from the disassembly, unfortunately, many of the parts that I'm going to be putting into this watch are actually from the donor movement. Okay, this is very tricky now because this is a small movement, so the train of wheels are kind of stacked up on top of each other, and it's a bit of a balancing act to get these things to sit the way that they need to, because ultimately there's 4 pivots that need to be lined up before I put on this right here, this train wheel bridge that goes over all of them. You see those 4 red dots. Each of those is a jewel that will accept an axle or a pivot from the wheel underneath it. And they all have to be lined up perfectly before I can screw it down. And this is a pain. Yeah, this doesn't look like it's lined up right. What is going on here? Yeah, these need to spin freely. And they're definitely not. Yeah, this is... I need to take this off and start over again. Yeah, this is a mess. Huh. Okay, that one. Is that one? Now, see, that one's not in its pivot below. By the way, it's not just the 4 upper pivots, it's the bottoms as well. Take a look at it on the microscope. See how that's not quite in its pivot? And then there, now it fell in. And now I need to get this one in its, and I'm talking about the lower pivot. And this is before I bring on the top plate, which all have to line up as well. So there's actually 8. You can see that hole down at the bottom. I need to get the bottom pivot into that. But when I move one, the other ones then move around. Like, what is going on here? This thing kind of a pain. Okay, let's try it again. After much finicking. Okay, gentle, 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 easy. Now, slight pressure on the top. Don't screw this up again. Oh, do we have some? I can put in one of the screws and just not screw it down all the way. And it can kind of act as like a test run to see if I've got everything actually lined up. Okay, so not down all the way. Let's see. Oh, thank God. It actually worked. I'll tell you, that took me an hour and a half. That was the biggest pain in the butt train wheel bridge I've ever dealt with. And I cannot tell you the relief that you feel when it finally sits into place. It really tests your patience. I'm a pretty patient person. It really tests your patience. Thankfully, we can continue with the build now, having left that nightmare behind. Can put on the ratchet wheel here. And this is a click. Actually, that's the crown wheel. I'm going to put on the ratchet wheel in a second. And I have to line up this little tiny spring. Hold it in place and then get the screw. Again, there's a lot of one-handed operation on a small watch movement like this. Okay, there we go. That's what we wanted to see, that spring action coming along. And now I can do the sliding clutch and the clutch wheel. So we've turned the movement over, and it's time to do the keyless works. And this is just the first part of the keyless works to go in. Both of these parts are from the new donor movement. They both did not survive the rust disaster. In fact, they were bonded together until I finally was able to pull them apart after all of that de-rusting. Okay, I can go ahead and put on this intermediate wheel as well. And it looks like the stem was subject to some amount of rusting, but I think it'll still function just fine. I'm going to give it a shot. I may just order up another stem just to put on in case, but I think this one will actually be okay functionality-wise. It actually is one of the beefier parts, so it can take a little bit of outside rust and still work. That's the new setting lever going into place, and basically all of these parts are from the donor movement on the keyless works, because that was the part that got hit the hardest. Okay, now I can put in the Born to Fly spring. I always imagine these springs with like a tattoo on their arm that says Born to Fly. Every time one of them jumps away from my bench and goes onto the ground. And quickly, I'd like to put on this setting lever spring, just because it also acts as a cover plate for the spring that I'm worried about jumping away, and it'll hold it into place. Okay, that got secured nicely. So things are actually coming along pretty good here. Especially considering where we started. Okay, now I can clean off the pallet fork here. And I'm just using, it's a solution called One Dip. It's like a solvent. I didn't want to put the pallet fork into the watch cleaning machine. Sometimes the cleaning fluids can dissolve some of the adhesive that's used to hold the pallet fork jewels in place. It's called shellac. And so it can be a little better to just clean them individually. I've had luck doing it both ways. Okay, let's see if we can get this pallet fork properly put into place. Yeah. Okay, this looks like it's coming around. And now the moment of truth. Can we revive this watch? Will it run? Using a hodgepodge of parts from a donor movement and the previously rusted parts, will you go, watch? Please start. Oh, that is exactly what you want to see right there, baby. That's the one. It does look like it's running a little slow, but we haven't done any of the oiling yet, and we do have a functional watch. So let's do the oiling and see how it comes out on the time grapher after having done the proper oiling procedure on it. As you can see, we use a few different types of oils for the jewels. This one is what we call 9010, and that's the one that's most commonly used on jewels like this. You can see the balance is actually stopped, but let's get this thing cleaned up. I mean, who knows what the condition of these jewels and the oil that was on them is, given the fact that it was, subjected to all the rust and all that kind of stuff. Also, we have no idea when it was last serviced. So there's the cap jewel. Now that's the top, which is rounded. It's domed. The bottom is flat, so I need to turn it over because the flat part is where I am going to put this, which is the oil. I'm going to put a droplet of oil, hopefully as close to the middle as I can get. Yeah, but I need a little more than that. Oh, that's nice. That's pretty. That's exactly what you want to see. And then I can take the top here and I can, don't get out of place now. There we go. And I can secure the jewel to the top and we can reinstall it into the movement. And as you can see, the movement actually kicks up right away as well after having installed it. So it does look like some lubricant was needed to make this thing actually run the way we wanted it to. I've got another jewel here. This is for the escape wheel, and this also has a cap on it. So we'll just remove the cap, and then the rest just sits in there. And now, once again, I can do the same thing. I can put a droplet of oil onto the cap jewel setting, and then I can replace it onto the watch. And hopefully that'll help it run efficiently and with much longevity. Yeah, I'm really excited to get this watch back into the hands of my aunt. She's a very special person. She's one of those people that kind of lights up a room. Whenever they walk in, they're kind of the life of the party. And speaking of, take a look at this. This thing's running fantastic now. No beat error. Within a second or two a day and a good strong amplitude. Who knew? This beast was ready to run the whole time. It was just hampered by rust. A few more parts to put on before we can call this job done, though. I need to do the cannon pinion, and this is there's a disc kind of held onto the bottom and it needs to be lubricated. So I'm just going to turn it over and put some grease on it, make sure that the grease gets distributed, and then use some Rodico to remove the excess grease before I reinstall the part on the watch. That one I had to replace as well. That one was turned into mostly dust. Cover plate, that was the one I had to pry off, so that one also got replaced because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to secure it properly given that I had to pry it off of the other screw. I was able to save a decent number of the parts on this watch, perhaps more than I thought I would be able to when we first got the dial off and we could see what was really going on. But quite a few parts needed to be replaced, as you can imagine. Okay, so movement's back together. Now we can take a look at the case once again. So I do need to reinstall the crystal. This is just press fit into place, and that's part of the problem, by the way. This is part of the reason why you can't really expose these watches to water of any sort, rain, washing hands even, you got to be careful, is because they just don't have any water protection at all. That crystal is just set into place. I mean, you can just push it out with your hands. Okay, here's the back of the dial. Again, I think this is mostly just cosmetic. Like, I don't think this rust is like eating away at the dial. Yeah, it's all sitting on the surface of the back of the dial. So I'm just going to use some swabs here to get the major chunks off and just clean it up a little bit. I mean, this isn't visible or anything like that. That looks much, much better. And I can clean off the front of the dial. It does look like the sides got a little bit of damage, but hopefully those will be somewhat covered up by the case. That's kind of what I'm hoping, where you won't be able to see those marks quite as much. Okay, now I can reinstall the dial screws that I did have to replace as well, of course. Now we can install the hands back on the watch. This is about as simple as a watch gets. This is what they call a two-hander. It doesn't even have a seconds hand. It's just hours and minutes. That's it. It's considered more elegant from a design perspective to not have the seconds hand. It makes the watch look static when you just look at it. There's no moving parts that you can see at a glance. Looks a little bit more maybe like a painting or a piece of art. Or maybe it's just that like you're too cool to care about the seconds. But, there's a place for everything. Dress watches tend to be built like this as two-handers, but, sport watches, people want to see things moving around and happening on their watch, for example. So you'll often see at least seconds hands, if not more. All right, let's make sure this minute hand is installed correctly. Yeah, there we go. I had to switch over the adapter thing on my hand press tool just to make sure that it was all the way secured. And yeah, that looks about right from here. And I'll even just clean up the hands a little bit with Rodico just in case there's any little debris or smudges on there. And that means that we can install the movement and dial back into the case. It's just press fit in. There's no magic holding anything in here. It's just made exactly for the size of this particular movement. Again, a little bit of air just to make sure that there's no dust or debris, because how annoying would that be if you put the case back on and then there was some dust in there. And now we can just click the movement back in. Hey, this is looking way better. And look how nicely that case cleaned up as well. Just a trip through the ultrasonic cleaner can get into those little crevices that can be difficult to get into manually and really bring the bright shine back, but without messing with the finish. There's no abrasives, there's no harsh chemicals in there that are, wearing away at the thing. So you can keep the finish if it's subtle like this or the patina on it, but also make sure that it's actually clean. All right, now all we have to do is replace the strap. And I think we can call this restoration job done. Take a look at it here. Lovely. It's a beautiful little watch, and I really can't wait to get it back on her wrist. This thing, again, I think she bought it maybe on a trip to Europe once and brought it home. But it's a nice little watch, kind of a cool design, a little bit retro these days. But yeah, I'm a fan of it, and I hope that she gets to enjoy it for many, many years to come. That's going to do it for this one. I wanted to say thank you so much for hanging out with me for this restoration. It really does mean the world to me that you spend your time with me. If you want to catch up with me on social media, I am on Instagram for this. It's wristwatch_revival. You can come over there and say hi. And with that, we'll see you next time.